Freak from CnS Outdoors. Today I'd like to talk to you about hooks. Today's application is pretty much going to be for bass fishing. And I was talking to a couple friends of mine here the other day. We all are tournament bass fishermen, and guess didn't realize there were that many variations of hooks and what's going on with them. So with that, I'd really like to get into the different types of hooks and the uses of those. So we have the single variation hooks, which is this style, primarily used for rigging up on worms, craws, Texas rigging. That's pretty much what use those for. We have a Kale style hook, which again is a single hook. We have some of these wide gap hooks that you can use. These are really used for like tubes when you want to Texas rig them. Some guys use them on swim baits, fluke style baits. You have the double hooks, which you would rig up on your toads, your zoom horny toads, frogs. That's what the double hooks are for. Then you have your treble hooks, and those are primarily used for your hard baits, your crank baits, your jerk baits, top waters. So with that said, let's kind of get into the different style of hooks. And as I showed you before, this is a cutting point hook. Now, it used to be the thought that you needed to pin their ears back when you set that hook and just hammer away. Well, nothing could be farther from the truth. When I first started out, I would lose a lot of big fish. Now, the cutting points are fantastic if you get that up in the roof of that fish's mouth. That's a little bit harder, bonier spot, and when you drive it hard, that's where it's going to stay, and it will stay pegged. The problem with them is if you hook them on the side of the fish's mouth, being it's a cutting point, it's going to tear a big hole in the mouth. So when that fish jumps up, there's a good chance you'll lose it, and I have lost a number of fish over the years by doing that. There's a needle point hook that is made. Now these are generally light wire. I prefer those. I still set the hook with them, but not nearly as hard. I try to do more of a sweeping action. I still do the overhead hook sets, but I don't have to hit them as hard. And I found that when I've taken, instead of using a heavy broomstick, a flipping stick, if I've gone to a medium heavy with these light wire hooks, I can generally get a good hook set, and I don't lose nearly the fish that I used to. You have a Kale hook. Again, that's a single hook. That's more of a J style hook. I use those when I'm throwing Cincos, and again, I set the hook, don't have to set nearly as hard. What I like about those is the J style hook. When they're pinned, you've got them. Don't normally throw those, the fish won't throw that hook, but this particular brand is a little bit heavier wire, so I do have to set a little bit harder. The hook point is a little bit different. It's more of that long tapering, and what I found with those is usually those hook points will bend. So on a needle point and a Kale hook, you always want to check those tips and have a good sharp file around. That's any hook the way it is, but those are kind of the differences between the Kale style hook, which is normally a longer style point, and like the super needles and the cutting edge hooks. Now you do have a Finesse hook. You're using these on Cincos when you're wacky styling, maybe on a drop shot. You don't want to set the hook on these. You just want to reel as fast as you can, and the hook will usually drive into the fish's mouth between the fish fighting and you reeling faster. Then you've got your wide gap hooks, like this one here and this one here. Now, This one here is these super hooks for swim baits, thrown for flukes. They have a wider gap from the hook to the shank over here. That is so when you do set the hook, it'll drive into the hook and the bait doesn't ball up over the hook point. Where this one here, it looks like it's the same style, but it's not nearly as wide from the shank to the tip of the hook. Your bait will ball up, not allowing that point to get driven into the fish's mouth. So with these, you're usually rigging up a tube Texas style. You can use them on a fluke. You can use them on a worm. A lot of guys like to use this style on a worm. I have a tendency to shy away from these on a worm, where I'll use this style here or these straight shank Nico hooks. This one happens to have a weed guard on it, but I found that this style hook has helped me land more fish than the other styles. One of the things with the double hooks, a lot of different manufacturers out there. I'm not saying one's better. I'm not sponsored by any hook manufacturer. That's why you're seeing all these different ones. But on these double hooks, what I have found is a lot of them are really wide between the two hooks. A lot of your baits, your horny toads, your rivets, are a narrow piece of plastic. So I like these Stanleys. These are actually made by Mustad. I've had very good luck. Owner makes a good one, but again, you got to watch it because they make a couple different styles. One is really wide, one is narrow. Always look at your plastic topwaters, your horny toads, your rivets. There's all kinds of different ones out there, but the wider the hook, the less chance you have to get into some of those narrow baits. So most of them have a screw lock keeper on there. I buy these keepers separately, but with some of these different double hooks, they come with the keeper on there already. But I've found you save a little bit of money if you can buy those keepers separately, those screw lock hooks or hijackers. Then the last one is your treble hooks. I like to use these round bends on my crankbaits. The reason for that is, and again, it's not just the Gamakatsus, but I like these. I like the owners, as long as they're not the cutting points. On my crankbaits, you're going to be horsing a lot of fish in. You're fishing them around wood, you're fishing them around rock. When you're using a lighter wire, such as the Dahachis have a little bit more tendency to bend. So again, I don't use the light wire Dahachis or some of the other wire treble hooks on my crankbaits because I horse fish when I'm on them, and I've learned I've had to set my drags way out. But again, these round bends from Gamakatsu and some of the other manufacturers, the one that have a little more stout hook, I like those on my crankbaits. Now, the light wire ones, like these, I like those on my topwaters. Of course, I got this one stuck now. I had it out for you and ready to go. The light wires I like on my jerkbaits. I like those on my topwaters because generally the fish is slashing at these, and the light wires have a better hookup ratio than the other ones. They seem to penetrate better, and there again, I want my drag set really, really loosely when I do that, because you're not trying to set the hook with all your might. Again, you want to reel that faster, let the fish, let the hook drive into the fish by fighting itself, and you'll be way, way farther ahead on that. Other than that, there's a lot of little differences in the different manufacturers' hooks. Um, again, this is winter time. This is when I like to change out the hooks on my crankbaits. Um, a lot of these manufacturers, especially Rattle Trap, they used to use the worst hook out there. Great bait, but their hooks were terrible. Rapala didn't have the greatest of hook either when they first started out. Now they have changed their hooks, but they're a light wire. I've had a little bit harder time keeping fish on, so that's why I change out my hooks to these Gamakatsu's round bend. I've had very good luck with those. So just keep that in mind, the style of fishing you're going to be doing as far as bass fishing is concerned. Hooks are huge. Between that and the line, those are the only two things that are going to hook that fish, is either the hook and the line. And if the line breaks, oh well. But if you have a bad hook and you don't check your points, your hookup ratio is not going to be very good. You can have the best line in the world, the best rod and best reel, but if that hook isn't what you need to find a better hook. So with that, tight lines and good fishing.